Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to you all. This is Rustin Edwards based in Geneva with my illustrious co-host, Mr. Christmas Ho-Ho Matt Stanley, based in the wonderful winter wonderland of Dubai. Happy
Hello.
holidays, Merry Christmas, and all of that rubbish
Yes.
to you with a bah humbug to boot.
Yeah. Yeah. End of the year. Was it this time next week? I'd imagine I will be. I would have had a glass or two. I'd imagine. Why not? It's Christmas. Getting ready. Very excitable children, which is nice. Love Christmas.
Yeah,
So
do you have
yeah.
a goose?
Happy. No, 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 no. We just no, just turkey. But looking forward to it.
Very good,
What are
very
these?
good. Yeah, well, we've got, oh, there's a turkey or a chicken. Anyway, I seem to recall
Yeah.
a point in time where you were talking about wearing a chicken suit.
Oh,
A
blimey. Yeah, that was a while ago. That was, hang on, when was that? That was
few
three
years.
or 4 years ago. Yeah, for the uninitiated, I made a stupid bet. Actually, it started out about 6 years ago when if Brent got to 100, I would run the length of Boat Key in Singapore wearing a mankini, at which point the majority of the market were vomited at the thought of me doing that. It didn't come true, but then I thought I'd do something a bit more professional, so I did a chicken soup, and that didn't work out either.
Ah, very nice.
There
Well,
you go.
here we got this morning, crude down 50 cents, 76.05 on the Brent front line. We've got WTI down 40 cents, 71.03. Crude structure in contango, both for Brent and WTI, and gasoline as well. So we've got a fairly weak positioning market when it comes to supply and demand standpoint, based on where the market's pricing it, despite what you might have read in the OPEC monthly report last week where they
Yeah.
show demand growing again, yet the IEA countering that. So looks like the market is more poised towards the IEA than with OPEC at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the IEA said about 1.2 million barrels of demand growth next year. OPEC could double that.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, read into that what you will. Like I said a few weeks ago, that the group have to be bullish. They have to be positive. They have to be, almost, they have to embellish stories in order to sort of keep up with their narrative. Because I mean, that's just what they have to do. The the IEA are a bit more optimistic. No, sorry, a bit more pessimistic, I would say, but I would say more realistic. And that was to their detriment because the OPEC don't really subscribe to what the IEA says anymore. So, I mean, it's, yeah, no opinions I'm keeping to myself there.
Well, I mean, I think the fact of the matter is that yes, I mean the IEA has been, I think, probably pessimistic on the demand front, which I think has actually been panning out because when you do look at the overall demand for consumer fuels in both Europe and the United States, it's been very weak compared to where it was pre-COVID. There
Yeah,
have been some glimmers of hope, some glimmers of spikes. I mean, jet fuel has been okay, but even that's still below the 5-year average from pre-COVID era. So people are traveling, but just not traveling as much as expectations were. I mean, you hear a lot of the headlines of oh, we have so many people traveling this year. I mean, the TSAs have cleared so many people for travel, yet it doesn't seem to materialize when it actually comes to the actual jet fuel consumption.
yeah. I mean, we as Kepler, we are more siding towards the IEA with what our demand forecast are for next year, about another 1.1 million um, barrels a day higher than this year, which is obviously a lot lower than what most people hope. But yeah, look, I mean, I can tell you now, I was at the airport last week, um,
Oh, here we
and yeah, I was on
you,
holiday.
you had to
I'm
wait
not
in
even.
line.
Yeah, no, I didn't wait line. Boss through. Private jets. What? No, I'm not joking. No, and we landed at 2:05, and I was in my car at 2:30. Now, Dubai Airport is very, very efficient, but it was spooky quiet, and it was really, really quiet. It's not meant to be this weekend, which is when the majority of people are traveling. but it was very, very still. Lots of people swanning about, not knowing what to do. I was away at a similar time last year, and the traffic was much, much busier than last year. But again, it might just be a time of the year thing, i.e., when people are going to move away, when schools break up, etc. But yeah, look, I mean, Dubai Airport has had a great year. It's back to where it was pre-pandemic. It's extremely busy airport now for transient passengers, more than people just coming into the city. Um, but yeah, very, very quiet, and I think that'll probably be a theme. I think a lot of people this year, just because a lot more people are sort of watching what they're spending, I think a majority of people I'm talking to not going out, staying at home, fairly somewhat of a muted Christmas compared to Christmas before.
Yeah,
I think that
that
it will,
seems to be a general theme that we see. Most of the people I've spoken with are looking at it from having less consumer buying of things and more potentially just doing a trip and calling that the Christmas gift for the year.
yeah,
Still go out and seeing family, what have you, but not spending as much as they had in the past this year around, just because things don't look as bright economically as they were maybe last year or the year before, when you had the euphoria of the, okay, we're all out of COVID, let's celebrate, to crap, things don't look too hot, let's watch what we do.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, there's a part of me well, I mean, I've just bought a house and I'm renovating it and I've had a new baby, so I'm allowed to feel a little strained at the purse strings, if you like. But yeah, I think it's I wouldn't attribute that caution, from people's buying powers to, COVID is, the sort of, what do they call it? COVID revenge or something, revenge travel,
Yeah, the
revenge buying,
revenge
all this.
travel due to COVID. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't buy any of that. I mean, yeah, we all had it. Every single person who was locked down went, is the pub open? Everyone was like, bosh, straight in the pub. That kind of wore off about a week, after about a week, especially if you're my wife, it did. But in terms of the COVID travel or COVID, no, I didn't really buy that. I'm not sure people will spend less. I just think they want to spend it in the right places. Like, we really enjoy cooking our Christmas lunch as a family. Instead of paying, what would it be? I don't know, 1,000 dirhams a head, something like that. Say $250 a head for eating out in a restaurant, and you're not really sure what the result might be. I think people are like, well, I might as well do that at home. At least I've got all the comforts and all that kind of stuff. So I think people's habits haven't changed in terms of indulgement at certain times of the year. I just think people are a bit more wary about stuff than they used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
have to see.
I think that's true. And I think we'll see that probably materialize as we get into Q1, Q2 of next year, as the general feeling of the economy in Europe is in general slowdown mode. United States economy, depending on who you read and what you look at, could also be in a slowdown mode. And that's why everybody's calling on the U.S. Federal Reserve and other central banks to start pivoting at the end of Q1, just because to help with a quote unquote soft landing. Um,
Yeah,
can they achieve that? Who knows? I mean, I think the biggest picture that we'll see going into next year is going to be how does the geopolitical card play out? Because as of right now, we have probably one of the biggest disruptions to shipping in the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb, with the Houthis attacking commercial shipping on what looks like a daily basis at this point.
yeah, yeah. I was going to ask you. I mean, nice segue there, Edwards. Every week you do it. Yeah, I was going to ask you. So lots of. I mean, what have we got? CMA CGM, big ship owner. MSC, Mediterranean Shipping Company, the biggest shipper in the world. Maersk, I think, the number two. And then, like I said, CMA CGM. Others will inevitably follow. Have said that they're going to ban their ships transiting through the Suez Canal because of the dangers, where you said, offshore Yemen, because there have been so many attacks on cargo ships transiting through that part of the world, which is really sad. Of course, it's linked, and people are linking it by default to what's happening. The devastating situation in Palestine and Gaza, and Israel, what's happening there. So, there's a lot of concern. And I think that people have just said, right, enough's enough. So instead of going around the Suez, they're going around the Cape of Good Hope via South Africa. And just for the uninitiated, Russ, what does that mean in terms of what it costs for a ship to go round there? How many extra days? If people are waiting for their new stupid e-scooter for Christmas, is it going to arrive late because it's not going to turn up in Rotterdam on time? What does it mean for extra number of days, extra cost, and what it means for freight in general? Is that will we see an increase in freight costs because of this going on?
Well, I think in any case you look at it, it's an extra 15 days of transit time when you take the Suez Canal out of the picture if you're going from Singapore to ARA. That's Amsterdam,
The
Rotterdam.
Amsterdam, Rotterdam. Yeah.
So another 15 days of transit time on your vessel. And that's just going at a moderate sea speed. Yes, you can change that by going a bit quicker, but then you burn more fuel, add more cost. So you had 15 days of
Right.
extra cost. That's 15 extra days of time on your ship, as well as 15 extra days of bunker fuel, which could be another 600 to 700 tons of fuel being consumed. So
Okay.
net, it's an increase of operating costs by about 25-30% when you increase that.
On top of on top of on top of the cost right now, say if you have got I don't know, let's
So
VLCC
say,
going
yeah, go ahead.
from on fuel oil going from ARA into Singapore, and then you have to pay 5 million for that. Are you saying now you'd be paying like $6-7 million for that?
So on the front haul, the VLCC would most likely be bypassing the Straits anyway, or the Suez Canal anyway, because she's too deep to go through the canal. And so
Right. Okay.
it'd be on the back haul where the extra cost would come in. That's on the ballast leg if you're coming in ballast, or if you happen to shoot up to the Middle East to load up a cargo of crude oil, then you go around Africa. So you may not see it so much on the VLCCs. It's probably going to be materializing more on the Suezmaxes and the Aframaxes and
Okay.
your LR1, LR2s, the ones that can transit the Suez Canal fully loaded. So you see that extra added freight would come to those vessel classes, which would put an upward bias on VLCCs as well, because eventually it does roll uphill. But you'll probably see the reaction more on the smaller freight than on the larger freight, just because of whether they can transit through the canal or not.
Right.
And so it's basically going to really impact your Indian refiners exports going into Europe. It's going to impact your potentially your UAE refineries. Okay, out of Saudi Arabia, they'll be kind of a mixed impact because not only can you have Yanbu and the export facilities on the Red Sea side that are north of the Straits of Bab el Mandeb, so a ship theoretically could go through the canal, load in Yanbu, and go up north to the Mediterranean without much of an issue.
Okay. Would that mean that if you are Saudi Aramco and you are loading out the Red Sea, that your freight becomes a lot more expensive because there are no ships in position?
Well, you could become more expensive, or you could become prime for a ship that's sitting there looking for some way to get out. So it just
Right.
depends on which way you're going. But nevertheless, it does show that there is, a lot of work that needs to be done within the freight markets in order to really suss out how much is going to impact. But nevertheless, it should see an increase in ton miles across container, dry bulk, wet bulk ships, because any ship that was
Yeah.
going to transit through the canal is not going to do it when missiles are flying.
So if you, and I'm not laughing, I don't know why I'm laughing. It's not funny at all. But if you'd saved all your dough all year to go on a cruise that started in the Red Sea, which a lot of them do, and then goes round to here, goes to Muscat, goes to UAE, that would, I mean, they'll be cancelled because there's no way that a cruise liner, and I'm using this as quite probably a very small example or of the amount of traffic, whether it's pleasure craft going through the Suez Canal versus commercial traffic. But, just from a hospitality point of view, to bring because it affects everyone. It's not just a cargo of gasoline or a cargo of petrol or a lawnmower that you're waiting for spring coming on a container ship. In the cruise line of business, that will all be cancelled because they couldn't go around the Cape, right? It's just not possible, not
Well,
practical.
either they cancel or they reroute and they head north instead of going south. And so instead of having a cruise to Dubai, Oman, you have a cruise now going to Turkey.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. You raised a few points there. I mean, 25% that you see as the potential impact that this closure of the straits or the ships the shipping owners taking this measure to not go through the Suez Canal at the moment? About 25% higher. Okay. COP28 was last week. Very successful after weeks of after a whole year of planning, and now they came out of it. They've got this transition plan. But if you just look at it right now, it's staying on the Suez Canal, and it is linked. The environmental impact from these straits being closed is quite significant then in terms of extra pollution that no one was factoring in because of increased bunker consumption from the ships. So it's a much wider issue than it just being reported that because of the Houthi rebel attacks on some ships, that the Suez Canal is not going to be used. It's a far-reaching issue.
Well, and if you want to add that to cost structure, think of the impact that a vessel is going to have in regards to the European EUA. The EU ETS kicks off as of January 1st of this year, which is an incremental increase in cost of shipping going into and out of Europe. And so if you're planning
ETS stands for
emissions trading scheme. So for those of you not initiated who may not be aware, but in January 1st of 2024, the European Union will bring maritime transportation into and out of and around the EU as part of the emissions trading scheme, which means that for every ton of carbon that you emit, you have to buy a corresponding emissions credit to deliver to the European Union at the end of next year, September 30th of next year, if you want to be fully accurate. So the question is now, if you were planning on having a quick trip into Europe and get your cargo discharged and get out before the EU ETS kicks in, now you're deviating around Africa, and all of a sudden now you have an extra additional cost structure being thrown on top because you now have this EU ETS to contend with on a longer voyage with a larger consumption of fuel and thus larger emissions of carbon as you move to the port.
Wow. Okay. That's one to pick up in 2024. Series 4, people. Series 4. Okay. Sticking with that then, and this emissions trading and what's going to happen with freight. The bigger issue to me is news values when it's come to very unfortunate incidents that have happened, excuse me, in the last 2 years. Russia, Ukraine, Sudan, Central Africa, Niger, Chad, DRC, heightened conflicts, and now the East Med with Israel, Gaza, Palestine, and now the Houthi rebels again. I'm worried, right? If I'm looking back at the year that's been and what we, to bring it back into the prism of the barrel and all that smoking barrel, I think things are getting worse. And I don't think that it's being acknowledged properly, because the closure of the canal from MSC, Maersk, you guys, is so significant to the point where what will it take politically, commercially for Maersk, you guys, MSC to allow transit to happen again? What's the end game there that needs to happen for people to go, it's clear, it's fine?
Well, I think it's going to require something from the Houthis to stop just indiscriminately shooting missiles or drones, or whatever else they're using to attack ships. I mean, their statement is that, any ship that is not bound for Israel is going to be fine, or anything without a non-Israeli exposure is going to be fine. Yet they seem to be attacking any ship regardless. And unfortunately, they seem to be targeting container ships predominantly more than any other type of vessel, because I think that the container ship gives them a far larger cross-section to hone in on versus where a loaded tanker might have too low of a freeboard, which is the distance between the water level to the top of the deck, where a container ship or a ro-ro ship, they have a much larger profile, and they're probably much easier to see from the shore, where a lot of these missiles are originating from. So it is a net impact of, there needs to be some type of guarantee, but then you're dealing with let's call it a rogue state, where what's the value of their guarantee? Because one of the interesting things is that they might be using the current conflict in Israel as an excuse to do what they're doing, but there's other negotiations going on as well right now, which they could be also using this as a way to help influence those negotiations. Because remember, there is that peace talk between Saudi and the Houthis going on. There's some negotiations between Iran and UAE going on. So there's a lot of things that are in play that this activity could be a more generalized, let's stir things up as much as possible, and then see what comes out at the end of the day.
Yeah. Sorry, I've had to take the hat off. I realise now why Santa. I realise now why Santa comes only once a year. It's because of his stupid bloody hat. It's too hot. Anyway, no, I think you're right. Look, I mean, there's so much discussion to be had around what has happened, why it's happened. Is there excuses? Is there over leverage? It's not, take up a whole episode. But yeah, it just worries me that, where does it end? What's happening in Israel, Gaza? There were some ceasefires, and now it seems it's got a lot worse. Support for Israel is waning quickly. I wonder where it all is. And I read a story the weekend. I mean, my daughter's their nativity play was last week or a couple of weeks ago now. And when you look at it, I mean, here it's obviously been the UAE, Muslim country. Christmas is a lot more accepted now as a religious holiday. When I moved here, 13 years ago, it was you'd struggle to find a turkey on Christmas Day, but now they're everywhere. And they were singing what was it once a song about Bethlehem, and I think Christ, what that country is going through right now is frightful, and how many people are ignorant of it. And I know it's look, coming from the year that's been 2023, it's been a bad year when it's come to civil unrest. 2024, that's what I sort of was getting to. I can't. I don't. I have an opinion, but it's not positive in any way about what is going to happen with all these conflicts. I can't see them coming to any kind of resolution quickly. There doesn't seem to be a peacemaker. Qatar have tried, indeed a fairly successful job, but I want to be positive, but it just looks a bit grim to me, mate, I'm afraid.
Well, I would say that from a geopolitical standpoint, the world is, not a nice place to be in. When you think of all the different conflicts that are around the world, you've got, as you mentioned earlier, Ukraine, you've got what's going on in Israel and the Palestinians, you've got the Venezuelans and Guyanese as well.
Yeah.
Although they seem to be taking a bit more cautious approach and not so bellicose in their rhetoric. But nevertheless, and then you've got Taiwan, China, you've got North Korea test firing their ballistic missiles once again. I mean, so you just have all these points of non of activity, which could flip the script into a very poor situation going forward. And it is hard to say that going into 2024, it's probably going to be more, not less, geopolitical risk as we move into 2024. Because that's just because I
just
to see how it, and when you say you're looking for a peacemaker, I mean, part of the problem that a lot of this stems from is the fact that Russia being an aggressor in Ukraine, Russia used to have a lot of influence around the world about keeping things kind of mellow on a status quo point. But because now that they've done what they've done over the last 2 years, because it has almost been 2 years since that conflict kicked off, the United States is doing what the United States is doing. They've kind of both have lost their bully pulpit when it comes to trying to be peacemaker around the world. And I think without that leadership, it is going to come down to more regional players to play the peacemaker. So, hopefully Qatar can become a bit more stronger in how they deal with the current issue between Israel and Palestine. Brazil stepping up in South America between Venezuela and Guayana. Houthis, all right, who knows how that one gets resolved from a peacemaker standpoint? Is it Saudi and Iran coming to an agreement and causing that to tone down? But that's probably what, the global peacemakers probably being reduced back to this whole destruction of the globalization into more regional players is probably where we're heading to. And then hopefully in 2024, more regional players will step up and you'll see better control of a region versus this overarching police from 2 superpowers or 3 superpowers.
Yeah. Don't worry though, because Donald Trump will be in power by this time next year, so we'll all be fine.
Ah, right.
Yeah, I wonder. I wonder if he will. I don't know. Yeah, but
Ah,
he's look. I mean, I'm looking at the, Anyway, we'll talk about Trump next year. I'm sure that's all that will dominate the news. So just to wrap up that about the freight, then. So 25% higher freight costs you see, 15 days extra voyage time has a big knock-on effect to the EU ETS ban that's come or system that's coming in Jan 1st. And essentially, in order for there to be a U-turn, and I mean that literally, pun intended, for there to be a U-turn, I think things in the region in general need to calm down a hell of a lot before people say, right, we'll start using the canal again.
yeah.
So if you were to put a timeline on that, I mean, factoring that in, what do you think people are playing it week by week, month by month?
I think it's got to be a week by week type play at this point because you need to see continue. I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, there hasn't been an incident in a week. Do you risk it? Or do you wait for 2 weeks to go by? Do you wait for 3 weeks to go by? Because you're talking about the life of people on a ship, of crew members. You know, these ships are not autonomous. There is a crew of 30 to 40 people working that ship whose lives become in jeopardy if they go down. And to be quite honest, armed guards will not protect you from a missile.
No, no, it's a very sad that it has got to the point it has where it really couldn't escalate much further if you are a seafarer, you're right. Anyway, what else have we got? 2023. Oh, loads of people messaging me, sorry. 2023, what we got? Right, China demand. What did we say?
I've been saying China demand has been pretty poor all year. You know, they bought a lot of crude, they ran a lot of refineries, but their economy haven't didn't really take off. So the failure to launch, or maybe to launch at the ballistic stratospheric takeoff, it's more been kind of a slow, overladen airplane takeoff where it's having trouble getting enough lift to
Well,
move.
like an Indian moon landing. It went really, really well, and then it went wrong. And then everyone was like, "What?" I haven't read. I mean, look, it was very. I saw Modi waving his Indian flag, and it was great. They landed on the dark side of the moon. Um, and then I haven't read anything about what happened to that poor rover because it failed. But yeah, much like an Indian moon landing, I think the year for China has been one of hope and started off okay, and then has sort of petered out into a bit, you know.
And you know, when you have the government continually talking about more stimulus needing to be added to the economy to bring back demand. I mean, there was one article, I believe, in Bloomberg where it was saying that you know, people with Chinese bank accounts were getting text messages to tell them to spend. Um,
Yeah.
you know, if that's not top-down control, I don't know what is. But nevertheless, you know, you're trying to overcome the mentality and the mindset of the Chinese consumer to open up their checkbooks and go out and buy things that maybe they don't want to buy anymore. You know, there's been a lot of people who've been burned in the real estate market in China, and that's, I think, causing caution to come into the consumer, and therefore not pushing the economy to the heights that people were hoping to see. Now, when it comes to petroleum demand in China, you know, I think a lot of people continue to miss and still miss, but I think the IEA's picked up is the EV penetration within the market has been huge, and it is eating
Yeah.
to their overall consumer demand of fuel. I mean, EV penetration had, you know, and I gotta say that I think the IEA is calling it correct. That is the biggest drag on petroleum demand across the northern hemisphere at the moment. When you look at the United States, Europe, China, and other Asian countries, EVs are taking over. Despite if you like them or if you don't like them, you can come up with arguments, oh, they're not carbon saving, they're not this, that, and the other thing. It's still happening. And it is eating into the underlying demand profile. And I think that's where you know, maybe OPEC is caught too far in their own ways, and that's why they can't come to grips with how much demand really is out there. They keep projecting higher demand than other people are showing.
With the agreement that the world came to last week at COP28 here in Dubai, China were a big part of that discussion. Of course, they have to be. Um, do you really think that we've hit peak demand then? I mean, if people want to sort of be phasing fossil fuels out by, what do they say, 2050, I don't want to wish time away, but that's not a long time for the world to transition from what we have been burning for the last 150 years or longer, if you like. I mean, China, I read Clyde Russell's article about steel output. Their steel output's still going to be 100 million tons a month. They're not slowing down at all. Now you know, in order to make steel, you need coking coal and iron ore. That's still going to be, well, where will it be in 2050? Who knows? Yes, the electric vehicle penetration has probably had a more profound effect in China than anywhere else, because they're an
Well,
oil consuming
I think it's
nation.
had a demand in the United States as well. U.S. demand for gasoline down 400,000 barrels or more
Yeah.
this year versus 2019. And, so I
Well,
mean, it is showing itself in a lot of other locations, and it's showing itself up in the diesel demand as well as the gasoline demand, because depending on what type of car you have, if you're replacing your ICE engine with an electric vehicle of one type or another, you're eating into consumer petroleum demand. Now, to answer your question about peak oil demand, yeah, I think we're in peak oil demand.
you
I
do.
think, I think at this point, this is probably our highest demand. Now, does it mean next year it falls off a cliff? No. I mean, we probably meander at this 102, 103, 102, 103 million barrels a day for the next 3 to 4 years. And then, we'll
Yeah.
start doing a glide path lower as just overall consumer demand shifts from one fuel of energy to another. Now, there's a lot to be said of EV penetration, and there's a lot to be said about efficiency gains. Because when you look at every new jet, every new ship, every new truck, every new car that come out, they have much better energy efficiency than the ones that they're replacing. And you can say that, yes, okay, all those old cars are going to go to the southern hemisphere, and oh my God, there'll still be oil demand. Yes, there'll be oil demand in 2050 from other countries, everywhere else around the world. There'll still be oil demand. Will it be 103
Yeah.
million barrels a day? No. It'll probably be maybe 40%, 60% of that in 2050.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's what I was going to say, you old dinosaur, and that's an argument we've been having all year, and I want to have it again because, it wouldn't be the barrel without you and I having to tear up. Um, yes, I think we've hit peak oil demand in the saturated, mature economies. I do. I think Europe, I think Oceania, I think North America. I think, yes, we've hit peak oil demand. I don't think we're anywhere close in Latin America, Western East Africa, and the Middle East yet, and South Asia. Now,
Why? Are the
China,
Middle East going to have a massive growth spurt?
who?
The population is going to what, triple in the Middle East?
I've tried to. Look, I've had 3 kids here. I mean, I have. Um, yeah, you're welcome. No, look, I just where is the middle class growing? The middle class is growing. India, Pakistan, East Africa, West Africa, Brazil, Ecuador. They're the places where the demand centers are. And that's what I've been saying to you all year. Now, yes, it's a sort of, I don't want to say a sort of, everyone's driving 50-year-old Golf, 15-year-old Golf GTIs, but things are changing, especially in the Middle East. The population boom here over the last 20 years has been extraordinary. And Saudi Arabia in 20 years' time will show the same. So I think that that's a demographic shift more than oil demand actually topping out. But I think that we'll probably have to see, because as much as the population is growing, like China, I'd argue China is probably around peak now. I don't see it going. I don't see that the children, the 21-year-olds who are leaving university are not buying the 7-litre Hongqi massive things, the Rolls Royce things. They're buying sensible 2-door electric.
Oh, we seem to have lost you there, Matt.
Hello?
Oh, there you go. Sorry, we missed you mid-rant.
That's the feds. The feds are on at me. The feds, not me, Gov. No, what I'm saying was that I think we probably hit peak demand in China. I think that the demographic there has got to the point where it's saying, yeah, like, I don't need to buy a Range Rover, or I want to buy
A BYD.
you know, a BYD, a two-door thing, so I can get to work as quickly as possible in a safe way, environmentally conscious as well. And that's a big shift. What the oil market has relied on China for the last 35 years to save the day. Is that going to be there going forward? No, and we've said that all year. But I do think that the demand centers are moving. I just see the needle moving in that it's the demand centers, and we see, from a trading flow point of view, so much more material going into East Africa than it was, and West Africa. And look, I mean, that brings me nicely on to the next point, one we've been talking about all year. Dangote.
Yeah.
First cargo arrived last week. Cargo of Agbami crude, which is a
Very
you
light,
know,
sweet crude.
yes, and that's really put real focus on the whole sector, what it means for crude. Um, yeah, look, I mean, we expect the refineries to supply some about 150,000 barrels a day of gasoline by mid Q2 next year, and that will displace a large number of European fuel imports into Nigeria. That is happening. Now, we've been talking about it all year. These things are always delayed. And it's such a sort of milestone for the West African economy, not just Nigeria, the African continent in general has been banging on about all year. It is happening. And I think if you are a gasoline trader in London and you're relying on your West African short to save the day again, enjoy Christmas, but boy, you've got to concentrate on where you're putting your barrels come January, mate. I'm telling you.
Well, it is going to be a question of how does the West African new West African refining base. It's not only Dangote, but it's also Soweto in Ghana. It's also the they're restarting Port Harcourt after
Yeah,
3 to 4 years of non-operation. I mean, so if you have all
yeah,
this new refining capacity coming online, and it says, okay, that feeds the needs of the local populations in the West African basin, then yeah, it does change a lot of shifts. I think in 2024, that's going to be something we'll have to contend with, not only on the clean product side, but also on the crude side. Because when you add up all
mm,
those refineries coming up, that's basically consuming one Suezmax worth of oil a day. Which, okay, that frees up 365 Suezmaxes, if you do the rough math,
yeah,
from the trade flow, which then puts potentially a downward pressure on Suez freight. So you need something else to offset that to keep the market on the freight side balanced, but also pulls that type of West African crude from a lot of other markets that would normally go to. And so it does change refinery slates when you look at where West African crude flows to, Northern Europe or China or India, because you're going to lose that much flow when these refineries
yeah,
are up and running.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, we'll see what happens with the test runs. But I think another one to sort of, okay, let's put that in the 2024 basket of stuff that we're going to talk about early next year, because the longer the more, this won't just be one cargo. There'll be many cargoes now, and then it all starts. The whole, literally the wheels are in motion. So Dangote, good news story for Africa in general. Pleased it's happening. Not a good news story for a gasoline trader in the US, in Europe, excuse me. But we'll have to see what happens with that flow. That's really going to be one to watch in. Like I said, we see 150,000 barrels a day flowing domestically in Nigeria by the middle of Q2 next year from Dangote. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is going to be also the knock-on impact to the gas oil as well as the jet fuel market, but that's probably going to be the initial impact we'll see probably more on jet kerosene supply, because they still use a lot of kerosene in home cooking.
Yeah, yeah, DP,
At DPK, and then you also have
yeah,
the gas oil flow into all the trucking whatever. So I mean, it's a great thing. Hopefully, the refinery kicks off and things go without a hitch. But refineries always have problems when they start up. So what I'd hate to see is that everybody poo-poos it if there's a hiccup. Like, oh, see, oh, I can't. But I mean, look at Al.
no,
We can take Al Zor, Kuwaitis, KPC. They know how to build a refinery. Yet Al Zor's
yeah.
how many hiccups in the last 6 months?
Well, I was actually looking at that because Actually, I can look at it again now. Sorry, I haven't got my usual screens. My computer kind of blew up when I was away last week. Serves me right for going on holiday, doesn't it? No, I was having a look at what happened with Al Zor because remarkably stable. It was. Let's have a look. Al Zor, we have the ways. Yeah, see, we it averaged between June exports 1.2 million tons, July 1.2 million tons. August dropped down a little bit. It always would have done because of seasonal air conditioning demand locally in Kuwait. It's bloody hot up there. Million tons in August, 1.2 million tons September, and then down to 570 in October, 388 in November, and we've got a total of 151 in December. So it's a real sort of
Yeah, but November
yeah,
is when they had the problem with the fuel gas system, and that's what
yeah,
shut down a couple of shut down the refinery for the better part of like 3 weeks.
yeah. But I'm just saying, October, in terms of fuel oil exports out of Al Zor, we had September 610,000 tons. October it dropped to 90. November 45. December 24. So they're still supplying their G2G, their government to government contract with the Qataris, and that's it. I'm talking about specifically here on the point 0.5, the low sulfur fuel
Right.
oil.
Okay.
So that's what that is. The NAFTAs, and I can actually tell you what the NAFTAs are doing. I go CPP, Clean Petroleum Products. Yeah, even look, November, 340,000 tons of exports compared to 750 in July. So there's a lot of jet and naphtha that's still going into the naphtha's all going to Japan, and the jet's all going into Amsterdam and Milford Haven. So yeah, look, I mean, it again. Look, there's a couple of things we've been talking about. What's happening in Al Zor? Don't worry, it will be sorted next week. Hasn't materialised. We heard that in middle of October. We're now at the end of December or the middle of 18th of December. The same as the Iraqi Turkish story. In April, 400,000 barrels a day. Don't worry, next week we're going to have it sorted. It's still not sorted. It's still not flowing. If that's the pipeline, the Shahan pipeline that the Iraqis use to export material into the Med. So 400,000 barrels a day. There was a disagreement and they shut the pipe. They said it was going to be back online. That was 9 months ago in April. Nothing has happened. If a headline like that came out, 400,000 barrels a day pipeline shuts until the end of the year, there would have certainly been a more profound reaction in the market, don't you think?
Well, I think there would be now, and there was a reaction in the market, but again, the market's oversupplied crude, so it hasn't done much. I think it's done more on product basis, where you've had stronger high sulfur fuel than you've had
Yeah.
versus other products, because the Iraqi crude is mainly a high sulfur fuel producing a heavy sour crude. Now, the question I would have though is that with the issues in the Red Sea, does that put impetus on Turkey and Iraq to come to a solution, or Iraq to come to a solution, in order to allow their crude to flow? Because if they have to go the long way around versus taking the short haul route, they could probably find themselves with a much better benefit to be loading out cargoes at a Sayhan and come to a deal with Turkey than trying to do stuff on a longer haul term.
Would you say Venezuelan crude would be a happy substitute for the high sulfur Iraqi stuff?
Well, it is, and that's why a lot of the Venezuelan that's been loaded out has been shipping to the Far East for the most part. It has not
Right.
really gone to Europe, and that's part of the reason why in my opinion, why there's been a relatively stronger high sulfur fuel market going here into the end of the year, from where it was to where it is now, because those Venezuelan barrels aren't going into the north; they're going around the Cape, going into India and into China. And they're happy
Right.
to take them because there is no penalty now to take them because it's all good, clean moving oil, non-sanctioned. Chevron's increased their
Mm.
production to 150,000 barrels a day, up doubled it from 70. They could probably squeeze a bit more out. Just depends on how much diluent and how much other systems they can get up and running after all the scavenging that's been done in those systems the last 2 years. But nevertheless,
Yeah.
I think we'll start seeing a bit more Venezuelan flow coming into the market. But it just depends. Does it go to Europe or does it continue on the long haul around? Now, one thing
Yeah.
one thing in 2024 to look out for when it does come to the long haul heavy sour crudes is, the Chinese government changing the consumption tax regime on imports of bitumen mix, where there was a notice in an article that they were saying that they'd be looking at the yield of a refinery, not so much the import of the product, as a way to apply the consumption tax. So if you're bringing in bitumen mix thinking you're getting a tax break next year, you might not get that tax break if you're a teapot.
Well, I mean, that loophole has been exploited so much over the last few years. It was probably a matter of time, but before that was enforced. And I think if it's happening now, yeah, I mean, it was, I wouldn't say inevitable because these things do take time, from a judicial point of view. But yeah,
But
that'd
then
be it.
my question would be, what does it actually do for the Russian fuel oil that's been used to go in, the straight run Russian fuel oil that's been used to go into China? How does that go in now? Does that go in just as a straight run feedstock, or does it they no longer downgrade it to bitumen mix? So it does buy to be something extra interesting to look at how those flows balance out if that change in consumption tax does come into play.
Yeah, that's certainly one to watch. I agree with you. I think that's a very good point about, the Iraqis and the Turkish guys getting together and thinking, this is perhaps a very good opportunity for us to market our crude rather than because we can bypass 400,000 barrels a day instead of, having to go around the Cape of Good Hope. I think from a commercial point of view, if there is something to be taken advantage of, it's definitely that, right?
Oh, I think so, definitely. I mean, when you start getting bottlenecks, I mean, that's when all these pipelines start becoming interesting. Um,
Yeah.
I would be interested to see how much crude could Saudi actually export via the Red Sea ports versus Ras Tanura.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't think they have that large of a capacity, but if they've been building an export capacity under a contingency plan in case Iran did something with the Straits of Hormuz, they could still get crude to market. That can be an interesting, different trade inflow. I'm spitballing on that one. Don't know if that's true or not. I'm not going to say that
yeah, no, that's a very good point. Yeah, that is a very good point. All right, look, 8 minutes left. Let's get to the elephant in the room. How did we get on with our crude forecast for the year? Crude price forecasts.
Well, my crude forecast would have been great if OPEC didn't cut 5 million barrels.
How did you get on with your crude price forecast?
Well,
Don't give me
this
excuses.
would not be the smoking barrel if we did not look internally and see what did we get right, what did we get wrong last year. So what did we
Yeah,
get
yeah,
wrong?
yeah. How did you
Was
get?
there
How did you get?
$120 crude? No. Was there $30 crude? No. We just kind of stayed smack dab in the middle of this $70 to $80 range.
Yeah, okay. So you said 40, market said is
Yeah, we
that
got
right?
to the mid 60s.
You got down to mid 60s. I mean, we're in danger actually. I was right this time, people. Don't worry. We did get around. We did get, I had to say it. I've been waiting 53 minutes to say that. No, only joking. Um, it's last week. The market was in danger of getting back down to that 67, and I thought, blimey, there's going to be another EGM meeting from OPEC, and what's going to happen there? Look, I think Brent has actually had a pretty good year. It's been, I wouldn't say trading margins have been quite as they were over compared to the last few years. I think some people have had a relatively poor year actually. But in terms of prices, averaging around, I think probably around $80 a barrel for the year, about what we called it. And probably a number that suits most people's budgets, to be honest. Not a bad number for the end user. I'd say it's pretty much a Goldilocks year if you're Brent.
Yeah, it's Goldilocks year. I would say maybe Goldilocks year, but the bed is too soft and the porridge was a bit too cold. Um,
Tough.
you know,
It's tough.
if you run a refinery, you probably had an okay year this year because you had lower operating
Yeah.
costs and you had good margins. Uh,
Well, you say that. What if you're a refinery that can run Russian?
you probably had an okay year as well because Ural's prices have been relatively, they've been following a fairly good differential when it comes to Brent, but they've been going up and down just like everything else. So they're not super cheap and they're not too super expensive. And there was a point
Yeah.
where Indian demand on Russian crude dropped off after it got over the price cap, and they went for
Yeah.
other grades that gave them better refining margin versus the Russian.
Yeah, I'm actually going to look at that because that was we started our year just India imports of Russian.
I think they're up to like
Uh,
1.6 million barrels of Russian crude last month.
yeah, it dropped off. So I'll just go crude and condensate. Yeah, so it went to a high in May of, if I do it in barrels a day, 1 second. 2.1 million barrels a day in May. Compare that to, let me have a look. 2021, May, it was 137,000 barrels a day. May 2023, 2.1 million barrels a day. So if I just go, hang on, and it dropped off a little bit. November, 1.6 million barrels a day. December is picking back up to 2 million barrels a day. So still sizable, but it has dropped off from the peak. We're picking back up now. And I think that
But
we
I think,
probably
but I think
flat
that
price can come off.
it,
Then yeah,
I think that pickup is a function of the price cap because the crude oil is trading below price cap.
yeah,
And as long as crude stays around this mid to lower 70 price range, it's everything is under price cap, so oil flow is not much of an issue. Now, the biggest issue on
yeah,
Russian, again, just like with every other grade going through the Red Sea, as we close the circle, is
yeah,
is the dark fleet going to go through the Red Sea or not?
yeah, yeah. That's Well, what you'll have to do, you'll have to subscribe to a ship and cargo tracking service in order to stay on top of that, Russ. That's what you'll have to do.
Man, there's a lot of competition in that space, I hear. So,
No, no, bollocks, is it? Talk about closing off the circle. Let's do it now. No, no, no. Okay. So I was right, you were wrong. I
and
was
I
right,
think
you
you
were
were
wrong.
wrong.
So what just before we wrap up for the year, and thanks to everyone for commenting, liking, subscribing. Please keep on going. We really appreciate it. Season 4 is coming at you in the new year. We can't wait. It's going to be bigger and better and loads of different things. Um, what's your view next year? Give us a $5 range where you see Brent being this time next year or averaging the year at.
Averaging the year, assuming that there is no change in the OPEC position and products where they sit, will probably be in the high 60s, low
Okay.
70s.
So 65 to 70.
Let's say
So is
67, 72.
60, okay, 67. Okay, so all right, okay, right. We'll remember that 18th of December at 2:58 p.m. local time. Russ says 67 to 72 for average of Brent next year. I think that's pretty fair, if I'm honest. I do think that there will be more knee-jerk reaction by an OPEC minister or 10 when Brent does flirt with 70. I think that's just a dynamic that the market has to understand that 70 just doesn't cut it for the
Well,
GCC core.
it may not cut
So,
it for the GCC core, but how much can they actually continue to cut? Because they're
yeah.
already at such a level where they're going to start, where they hurt their own economy. And so
And
I,
it seems the Saudis are willing to
they're willing to
play
accept
that.
the current output for another quarter, but there seemed to be a lot of disagreement in the last OPEC meeting about other people need to get involved.
Yeah.
The Saudis tired of carrying the weight, and so I think there's going to be a lot of that. We've got a new emir in Kuwait because His Highness passed away over the weekend. So
Yes. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
sorry for those who in his family and in the royal family, and blessings
Yeah.
to the new emir. May he have a wise and long reign. But with the OPEC, not really wanting to cut anymore, they're having trouble getting more people on board to cut. How much more can they cut? And
Yeah, but
it's
I
like,
think
do they need to go the other way around?
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I think there is that argument from a practical point of view, what they're capable of, but also I think that the group's overarching, um, you know, decision driver is flat price, and I
Yeah.
think that I'm gonna go a $5 range higher than you. I'm gonna go between 72.50 and 77.50. I think 75 is about the range. I think the first half, and we think the first half will be relatively weak because there will be an oversupply of crude. That will come back over the second half of next year. I don't see the rhetoric being the same in terms of first half is going to be meh, second half is going to be butte. I think that the market is um, a lot more intelligent than that now. I think that they look at things not through rose-tinted spectacles and they're able to identify their own sources of data to come to those opinions. So I'm going to say I think it will flirt around 75. I think we'll drop to the mid 60s at some point, and I think we'll spike up to the high 80s at some point as well. But I think 75 is about where I think the market will be happy. Lower than this year, yeah, sure. But I think that those OPEC demand stories have really got to start ringing true before everyone just sort of dismisses their monthly reports outright.
Well, I think the market's already dismissed their monthly report outright because we've got contango structure.
Let's ask Chicken. What do you think? He doesn't, he doesn't know it's a chicken. But no, it's been great. I've enjoyed it. It's been really good. So
All right, everybody.
happy.
As the bells are tolling in the cathedral up above, it sounds like we're come to the end of this year and this episode of the Smoking Barrel. Please click like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And if you have a chance this holiday season, please think about giving to those charitable organizations that are out there helping people in need, as there is a lot of things going on in the world and people can use your support.
Yeah. Merry Christmas, everyone. I'll see you in the new year.
Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you all, and to you all, a good night.